Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Muhammad Atif and this is the summary of today's lesson. Today we started lesson 5, unit 7 English student books, page number 104, 105. Before we started the lesson, I discussed the lesson objectives with the class. These are the lesson objectives on your screen right now. During the lesson we listened to an extract from a story. We listened to and answer questions, and we listen to and identify tone in speech. Then we talked about the characters in a story, and we talked about the ending of a story. We read the story, okay, and we answered the questions after each part in writing activity. And we will discuss critical thinking, predict and speculate, and we will discuss the moral of the lesson in next class as well, and we will also discuss the subordinate clauses as well. So after this slide, after the discussion on lesson objectives, I asked the students to talk about famous discoveries from their country. So I asked them what famous discoveries have been made in your country, what was discovered, who discovered it. So these are three questions, and some students participated and they talked about some discoveries, okay, and also they said that in Saudi Arabia, the petroleum energy, okay, petrol, oil is very important, and the Saudi government is doing a lot of effort to discover new assets or new resources of oil to produce more energy. So they said that the famous or important discoveries in their country is mostly about the energy sector. So the government is working really hard to find out new petrol resources. So after having the attention of the students, I asked the question 2, and question 2 is about reading and listening. So we listened to the track 42 and then we read the part 1 and part 2. So today we completed part 1 and part 2 to page number 105. So I'm going to include the track again, okay? So you can also read it as well. And I played first part of track 42 first, then we discussed the answers and questions. Okay, these three questions: what objects are in the storeroom? How is the mummy case described? What are they looking for? Then I played the track 42 again, part 2. So we discussed the question and then we read this text as well. And then we discussed the question 4 and 5. During the reading, we also discussed these vocabulary words as well. I didn't include vocabulary words separately because we have these vocabulary slides as well in our lesson: fade, lose brightness, musty, and unpleasant wet smell, inspect, look at. This is cobweb. In part 2 we have these two important vocabulary words: squiggly lines curving up and down, glint, look bright. So now I'm going to include first the track 42 part 1 and 2, and then I will discuss the answers as well.
Track 43. Track 42.
There's a Pharaoh in Our Bath by Jeremy Strong. Part 1.
The lid of the cobwebbed coffin was slowly pushed back and the two men laid it carefully on the museum floor. They stared inside at the beautifully painted ancient Egyptian mummy case, covered with picture writing. Daylight was already beginning to fade from the musty storeroom. The other museum staff had gone home, and the only company left with the two men now were the stacks of old mummy cases, ancient skeletons, and a large stuffed rhinoceros. Professor Jelly pulled the lamp closer and inspected the hieroglyphs. The light shimmered across his moon-like face. "What does it say?" demanded Grimstone. The head of the museum's ancient Egyptian collection stared over Jelly's shoulder. "Is it the mummy of the missing pharaoh?"
Part 2.
Professor Jelly took a sweet from his jacket pocket, popped it in his mouth, and bent over the mummy case. Hazelnut crunch. Now, this squiggly bit here says, "May perfumed flowers be crushed beneath his feet." Very poetic. "But who's inside?" Grimstone barked impatiently, and his great winged eyebrows crashed together over his hooded eyes and hawk nose. He stabbed a thin finger at one side of the coffin. "What about here? What does it say? It looks important." Professor Jelly sucked noisily on his sweet. "That bit there?" "Yes." "That says, 'Please keep this way up at all times.'" "What?" yelled Grimstone. "And that bit," continued the professor, waving at some faded hieroglyphs with a pudgy hand, "that bit there says, 'Not to be opened before Christmas.'" For a few seconds, Grimstone was stunned. Then his eyes glinted dangerously. "You're making this up, Jelly, aren't you?" The professor straightened his tubby frame. "Of course I'm making it up. Stop pestering me and let me study it properly. This mummy has been stuck here for 70 years already, ever since it was first brought to the museum from ancient Egypt for the collection. A few more minutes' wait won't hurt."
Okay, so that was the part 1 and 2 that we discussed in today's lesson, and then I also displayed the answers as well. Here are the answers on your screen right now. Question 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's all for today's lesson. We will continue this story in next class as well. So till then, take care. Goodbye.